So yeah, I've got rid of all my Adobe products. Alright guys, how's it going? Now before I start to deep dive into this conversation and cherry picking a little bit, if you use Adobe products, I have absolutely nothing against that. I actually think Adobe's a pretty good service. I think the software's pretty good as well, in terms of like After Effects, Photoshop, even something like InDesign. Now, I know there's a certain clique of people who are very anti-Adobe, and I remember when Substance announced that they had been purchased by Adobe, you would have thought the world had actually ended. It was pretty funny. But there is a certain bunch of people who are very, very anti-Adobe. Now, this could be because of their business practices. They do like to buy companies and basically liquidate them, or they try to integrate them into their own business. And at the end of the day, for me, that's just business. And I do think in terms of like Adobe Cloud, the value is pretty good, and again, I think the software's absolutely spot on. There's a reason why it's the industry leader. Now, I was fortunate enough, I was going to give up Adobe 2 years ago, but I was fortunate enough to actually know somebody who kind of works with Adobe, and they gave me a free license for a year for Creative Cloud. And I was very grateful for that because it saved me like £800. And it kept me on the gravy train to a certain extent. It kept me using Photoshop. I don't use After Effects as much as I used to use it. It's a good application, but the alternatives out there are getting better and better. And I'm not really an InDesign kind of guy. Like, I don't generally do stuff for print, and if it is, the client will handle it and not me. I like Illustrator, stuff like this, pretty good, and Adobe Audition, great software as well. But it came to the decision where, do I keep paying this certain amount a month? And if you want Adobe Cloud, I think it's about £44 a month. So it roughly works out to about £800 a year, which is a lot of money. You're probably thinking, well, what alternatives are out there? Or you probably already know the answer to this, to be honest. And I've pretty much moved my entire workflow over to Infinity. Now, I was incredibly lucky regarding Infinity. I bought it for absolutely pennies, and I mean pennies. I think it was like £25, £29. Now, when it comes to Affinity Photo, there's very little that it doesn't do compared to Photoshop, and you own the software, so you buy it, it's yours, you don't need to pay rental. And when it comes to the software, there's very little that it can't do compared to Photoshop. Now, the workflows are a little bit different, to be honest. Not different, it's just getting used to it. It's like anything else, and it's really good at handling large data sets. It also supports PSD files, so transferring from Photoshop to Affinity was dead easy, to be honest. It supports things like Photoshop brushes as well, and scripts to a certain extent. So, Affinity, I cannot recommend it enough. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, I was lucky enough to download the Designer and Publisher betas, so I pretty much got them for free at the same time. So Designer is pretty much your equivalent to Adobe Illustrator. Now, Adobe Illustrator is a great application, and so is Designer. And these companies have looked at Photoshop and thought, right, where can we make it better? How can we develop it? And I honestly cannot wave the flag anymore for Infinity. It's absolutely superb. Publisher, if you're into your InDesign stuff, will pretty much do the exact same. Now, the only kind of gap that it left me for was really editing video. And this is where I've pretty much moved over to DaVinci Resolve full time. Now, I was a big advocate of Adobe Premiere, it's pretty much what I learned my trade on. But when it comes to DaVinci Resolve, it only took a couple of days to get used to the software, and I actually think it's a lot better. Now, I could cherry pick the good points and I could cherry pick the bad points, but at the end of the day, it is free, and if you would like to upgrade to the studio version, it just gives you a little bit more options. It's pretty cheap, I think it's only about $230. Now, that pretty much leaves two gaps in the market for me. One is audio. Now, you can get by with things like Audacity, but I'm not a big audio guy, to be honest. Not compared to some people. Some people are really hardcore. Now, one of the things is After Effects. Now, I like After Effects, especially when you go back to the Andrew Kramer days and you go back to the Video Copilot days way back. But when it comes to working in the industry, there's only one winner in my opinion, and that's Nuke. And if you're going to end up becoming a professional compositor, Nuke is pretty much the standard. Now, I do not do enough compositing to justify the price of the product. I'm not saying it's not good, I'm just saying doesn't benefit me in the long run. So you probably could use things like Blender Compositor to a certain degree. It's okay, it's not the best to be honest, but it's free. So when you boil this down, it's not just about money. I mean, on the grand scale of things, like £800 for Adobe Cloud, I think that's actually very good value. And you can make that back in a week if you're a full-time artist, or you can in the UK. Even if you drop it right down to something like Photoshop, where it's like $7.99 a month, not that much money in the grand scale of things. So it doesn't really boil down to financial reasons for me, although it does kind of play an influence. But I think it actually boils down to the fact that software's changing, software's constantly evolving, and when it comes to Adobe Photoshop, yeah, they do have some nice features, but it's stagnated a little bit. And for me, I'm really a big supporter of Infinity Photo, and I think you get much more value in terms of the application. Now, it is a little bit cumbersome to use to begin with, but once you start getting in the workflow, it's pretty easy. So there is always alternatives out there in the market. It's just a rant of a video. Do me a favour, guys, if you've got any suggestions in terms of what applications you would substitute Adobe with, I'd love to hear. Anyway, take care, you know what to do.